Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. John. You know that because we met back in new media marketing, which is something I want you to remember because new media marketing is part of the same media channel as strategic public relations. So we're going to be dealing with a lot of the same concepts, but at the new media marketing level, we're looking at the individual influencer, a third party influencer, and now we're going to take on the role of influencer ourselves as the public relations department. So there, a lot of the concepts are going to be the same as we move forward. So my camera froze. It's time for a new computer, but under the COVID-19 standards, there's nobody at Full Sail that I can go get one from. So it just stops every now and then. At any rate, these are going to be the weekly sessions. Please come. Now you can come to the class session, which is going to be every Tuesday from 2 to 3. And if I have an overflow, if I have more material, then I'll cover additional material on Thursday. But the main class will be on Tuesdays from 2 to 3, so that you're getting what you need at the beginning of the week, and then you can have the rest of the week to work with it. Now, the other thing, I'm online most of the day, so I have the Zoom room open. When you come to the link that I gave you and you click on it, you'll actually come to a waiting room where you will see my smiling face and a tiny little picture and a message saying that the doorbell has rung and I am working hard to go answer it because literally you're in a lobby and then I have to let you in. But that's no worries. It works kind of neat. There's an actual doorbell and it sounds just like a doorbell. Ding dong. And that tells me to drop what I'm doing and go attend to the visitor at the door. Okay, so enough with the intros. Let's talk about what we're going to do today. And I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so you should see a blackboard in front of you, just like me going up to the blackboard and writing. So what I want to cover today is, one, I want to provide an overview of the course. The second thing that I want to do is, and so by the way, that overview is going to be week by week. The second thing that we're going to do is I want to go into week 1, show you the assignment, and discussion, and the rubric for the assignment. The next thing that I want to do is I want to talk to you about the function of public relations. And then we're going to talk about the and while I'm doing that, I'll explain in detail the strategic context. And that will get us primarily through today. Now, I have some additional material, and if I get to it today, then we'll get to it. If I don't, then we'll be looking to add that to the Thursday session that I'm going to run for you. I want to make sure that during this COVID-19 period, you're getting as much interaction, as much content, as much thinking skills, critical thinking skills, as you can muster as we go forward. Now, the one thing I did forget to mention, and we'll do this today, and that is cover the group project. I call it a group project, but you can do this individually. And I'll tell you why, reasons for both. But I wanted to, you got the option. How many instructors give you the option? So I'm giving you the option. And that's not the option with regard to group or no group. That's just the option, right? Okay. So let's talk about, let's not talk about that. That wasn't the slide I wanted. I wanted just a blank chalkboard. So in public relations, here's what we do. Week one, we're going to talk about the strategic context, and we're going to talk about a monitoring system. And then as far as the discussion goes, this first discussion is really important because what it's really doing, it's dealing with ethics, values, and worldview. And that is week one, okay? Now, week two, is actually kind of interesting because not interesting. It is like, I think, the crux of public relations. And what you're actually going to do, excuse me, I'm playing around with the computer for a moment, and it went exactly where I didn't want it to go. But you don't know that because I've got this locked in on my iPad, so you can't see all the dumb stuff I'm doing right at the moment. So week two, what we're talking about is the press release. Now, that's your assignment. But I got to tell you, the assignment is the outcome of really understanding the topic for week two. And the topic for week two is newsworthy events. Now, I just had a newsworthy event. Did you know about it? Did we do a good enough job of communicating it to everybody? Last week, I had two great interviews that we did. The first one on Wednesday with Paramount Networks, Paramount TV, the TV network. On Sunday night, the hit show Bar Rescue, and we had the creator, the executive producer, and the star of the show, John Taffer, right here in Zoom. He and I had a great conversation, and we had a number of great questions from students in the audience. So that was one to not miss. And we actually had a great conversation about marketing and messaging. So marketing and then messaging is communication, which is public relations. And what we talked about was, what does the world look like? What are the jobs that we're going to have to do, marketers and PR folks, in the COVID-19 environment? So once everybody is no longer under stay-at-home orders, the quarantine is lifted, you've gotten your get out of jail card or get out of the house card, and you're going back into the world. What is the marketing and the messaging going to look like in that environment, because we've got a lot of work to do. And if companies believe that they can cut their way to economic success in this environment by eliminating positions, they're wrong. And one of the key positions that I think you're going to see a lot of emphasis placed on is marketing. Not only marketing, but digital marketing, digital public relations, the whole 9 yards. So you're in a perfect place for where we're going in the next 18 months. So you should be excited. That was a tangent, wasn't it? So newsworthy events. We're going to talk about newsworthy events. Now, there's two types of newsworthy events: real events and pseudo events. And you have to be a master of both. And we'll get into that in week 2. Now, from a discussion standpoint, in week 2, we start to talk about measurement. Now, like anything in marketing, does that really say measurement? Anything in marketing, we can measure. And why? Because we always want to optimize what we're doing. So, and that's the difference between the virtual world and the real world. You know, in the real world, I've got to really struggle to capture data. But in a virtual digital world, I get data that I got so much data, I may not know what to do with it all. So we want to talk about measurement strategies as part of the discussion in week 2. So that brings us to week 3. We've got our press release done. Now, what are we going to do with it? Well, the answer is we're going to distribute it. So week 3 is all about a distribution plan. Now, the distribution plan is you've taken your newsworthy event, or I'm sorry, your newsworthy event. It's trustworthy. You've taken your newsworthy event. Now you've got it. What do you do with it? How do you distribute it? And how are all the different ways that we can use the content for this? Well, a newsworthy event is to public relations that a creative is to advertising in the purely marketing realm. A distribution plan is to public relations, just like a creative brief is to advertising and marketing. So we'll look at the similarities and the differences between a creative brief and the distribution plan. And your assignment for that week is to develop a distribution plan. And actually have a great template for you that's associated with the assignment. So if you follow the template in the example and do the same amount of due diligence research, you'll get a great grade. If you try to pencil whip it, you'll be lucky to get a C. Okay, so there's got to be a lot of detail in the distribution plan. And then the other thing we do is we talk about internal PR, and that'll make sense to you by the time we finish this when I talk about the function of public relations. Whew. That brings us all the way to week 4. Well, in week 4, you got 2 things going on. You got your crisis management plan that's due. That's the group project. And I'm going to put that down here. Because in essence, your group project should be something that you're working on all month. And by the time you get to week 4, it should just be putting some finishing touches on the project. So that's not what I consider, although it's important and it's a lot of work. It's not what I consider where the bulk of your time is going to be spent in week 4. The assignment is just the master journal entry. And that's important critical thinking reflection skills that you need to look back at what you did, what you learned, and what you're going to carry forward. And I give you some hints with regard to that too. So, because you've got your IMP is coming up soon, and what are you going to take away from this class and put into your integrated marketing plan at the end of your course? So we'll talk a little bit about that when we get into week 4. But the big thing is your discussion, and your discussion is what I like to call the redo. Why the redo? Well, remember that press release you wrote in week 2? I just don't give you a rubric and some comments on week 2. I actually take your submission and I go through it with a fine-tooth comb and I critique it as if I am the creative director or the principal for the agency that you're working for. And I give you feedback, and what I expect you to do with the feedback is improve the press release. So in week 4, you give me back your original without any corrections, and you give me your new and improved press release based on my feedback, so you get a chance to redo. The other thing that I have you do is I have you create a couple of other pieces of content where you are repurposing the content that you generated for the press release. That's going to be your press release is going to be the most content that you should be providing, with maybe 2 exceptions, and I'll tell you what those are in a moment. But it's going to be all the core content. Why? Well, because the press release, you send it out, and if we're just sending it to news media, we want to give them everything that we can give them for them to then write a great story. They're not just going to take the press release and replay it. No, they take the information from the press release and they turn it into a story. So the press release should have everything that you need to create all your posts. And those posts, what are the type of posts that we're talking about? Well, it could be an Instagram post. It could be a Facebook post. Heck, it could even be a Twitter post. But it also may be a blog post. Now, all these additional content objects that you're creating, they're going to be different, of course, than if you were just to take your press release and put it in your online newsroom on your website. Your online newsroom is where you should archive and contain the history of your press releases, along with some other things. But the press release is critical so that a reporter doing a story can go back and look at a number of past press releases and really understand the history of the company. If you don't have a dedicated or a specific part of your website that's about the history of the firm. So week 4 of the discussion, you're redoing the press release, and then you're creating a couple other pieces of content that relate to your press release. Now, one of those might be a blog article, which would be very similar to what you would want an influencer to do, right? Is to write a story for their blog. And so you can write a story for your blog, the company's blog rather. You and the company at this point are synonymous. Write that story, and lo and behold, you're really kind of doing almost what that outside influencer would do, but you're doing it on your own property, okay? Your own media channel. Whew. That was a lot. So that takes you through week 4 and gives you a good overview of everything. All right, so that was the overview of the month, week by week. Let's take a look at the assignment. Loading. I'm going to have to stop sharing for a moment. You get me full view again. And now I need to load back once more. Okay. So let me share. Where are you? There you are. We're going to share my desktop. Here we go. Okay, so here's um, I get to do a preview view, which means I get to see what you're looking at, as if I'm somebody in your cohort and taking the course with you. So here's the information. What's going on here? Preview. There we go. I don't know why it wasn't working before. Um, okay, so this is the case study. Now, let me say something about case studies. You're going to pick a company, and you're going to, the case study, all it does is provides a framework and some basic information to help fill in that framework. Your job is to use that framework and demonstrate what you have learned over with the material that you've been interacting with. So with this case study, what am I going to expect to see as far as some of the items that you're going to put into it? Well, in week one, we establish a monitoring system and we discuss what the strategic context is. I'm going to expect to see that in your case study presentation for the company that has crisis. In week two, you're sending out press releases. I want to see a press release strategy and distribution strategy that's part of your crisis plan. I want to understand what the company's ethics and values are, and how they have impacted, and the worldview of the company. How does this company take a look at the world? And I'll explain that in just a moment. And then, so you want to put all that together, and that'll be the framework for how you move forward. Now, you're going to identify the crisis, and then using all the tools that we discussed this month, you want to create a reaction plan and discuss how the company is going to mitigate the damage created by the crisis. And it should be, if it's a group now you can do this easily, one person. I like the group environment, but I don't like the group environment, and I'll tell you why. Number one, I believe I'm the only course director that has a group project. Believe it or not, we were once upon a time told everybody had to have a group project, and once upon a time, nobody ever came in and said, you don't have to do that anymore. So I think I'm still the only one, though, that has a group project. My throat's getting scratchy. Give me a second. But you can do this by yourself if you so choose. If you choose to work together as a group, I just need to know who the group is by the end of this week. In other words, I don't want all of a sudden at the last minute for a couple people to say, oh, crap, I haven't done anything on this. We better do this as a group, and we can divvy up the workload. That may sound like a great plan, but it's a horrible plan because you should be working on this all month. Group work is great if you can take the same group and have them function as a group over, in this case, the 12 months of the program. And why? Well, because teams or groups, they go through a life cycle. And the life cycle is they form, and then after they form, and as they're starting to understand roles, responsibilities, etc., we call it storming. And there's conflict. The conflict's got to be resolved. When the conflict's resolved, we get to the third tier, which is performing and doing things as a team, effectively as a team. By the way, do you know what the definition is between a team and a group? Yeah, you're right. A team, there's three things that distinguish a team. One, the work is interconnected. Second, the work is interdependent. And the third is everybody is held mutually accountable. We win together, we lose together. Think about a football team. Sports analogy is the easiest. Everybody's got a different role. But each of those roles are connected, and there's a common goal that everybody shares. That's the way that you define a team. A group can be any combination of those, but it's missing the third component, whatever the third component may be. Or it could be just one of those items. Now, sometimes we have groups and sometimes we have teams. But ideally, if we were to set up learning teams in month one, by the time you got to graduation, that team would be a very highly effective and performing team. Now, that doesn't mean that you cannot achieve that in a short time. You can. You need to establish a charter of how you're working. You need to be explicitly clear as to who's going to do what and who's going to be responsible for what and what's going to happen if somebody drops the ball. I give you a team charter template that you can work with if you decide to go as a team. Okay? Okay, so let's get back out of this. Oh, and how do you? Here's a question I get every now and then. So, how do you submit this? Because basically, this just says mark as completed. Well, you could certainly take it in the feedback box. Drop your the link to your presentation if it's on YouTube or Vimeo. If it's small enough, you could upload it here. I'll make some recommendations with regard to that. I would think that the easiest thing for you to do is to upload to either Vimeo or YouTube and make it private and give me the private link. Whatever you do, test the link. I get very upset when I get to go to a presentation, whether it's a weekly or the crisis, and the message is that video is not available. Imagine my surprise. So please double check that. That's one way, but the other way is in the group discussion. And the last this group discussion is designed so that you have a place where you can go and interact with people, and you can go in and create a post and make the post to say who the team is, what the topic is that you're going to be looking at, and then at the end of the month, week 4, you can go ahead and put your project in the discussion, and then I'll move it on the back end over to the actual assignment where you'll get your points. Because if you'll notice that the crisis communication case study is 15 points, but the group discussion, there's nothing. Now, there's a couple milestones throughout the month. I don't look at those too closely. For example, I'm not necessarily going to go in and look and see what your topic is. But if we run into problems with the group spending too much time storming or never coming out of the storming phase, then I go in and I look, and where I assess points is under professionalism, because let's face it, there's nothing less professional than not being able to work in a group, particularly in today's day and age where teams, virtual teams, are the way that America goes to work. Okay? That was a lot so far. Let's take a look at week 1. So week 1, there's some suggested reading. And this really is suggested. I would highly encourage you to glance through all this, and if there's anything that you want to drill down into, please feel free to do so. I will tell you that the public relations theory in O'Reilly is a very good book and give you a lot of good insights. So you may want to take, not only look at those particular chapters, but go ahead and really dive into that book in general, so that you're well versed. So that's week one. Again, we're using Riley. If you happen to come across an errant notation that says something about Safari, one, accept my apology and please let me know about it so I can get rid of it. Okay. All right, and that brings us to week one assignment, monitoring the brand. So the purpose of this exercise is to set up a market intelligence system using digital tools and then begin monitoring the online reputation. I just caught an error. It still says IMMS. It should say Digital Marketing Master of Science. At any rate, actually, I think I leave this in there for homage to my daughter, who's a 2014 graduate of this program, and who was also the valedictorian for her class, and she graduated with an IMS degree. That's my excuse. I'm going to run with it. At any rate, we want to be able to analyze the strategic context and operating environment. We want to identify and manipulate critical tools to be used to monitor the brand. I'll talk about that in a moment. And model a public relations presentation discussing both process and outcome conclusions. You're going to have to do a video. And that video cannot be more than 6 minutes. Okay? And there's a number of things that you're going to have to convey in that video in 6 minutes. The way to think about it is you got two parts, part A, part B. Part A is 3 minutes, part B is 3 minutes. And never the two shall meet. Okay? So part one, you want to describe your selected case study company from a strategic perspective. What do I mean? Well, when we talk about strategy, we're talking about the mission, the vision, the values, the culture of the company, and any critical success factors that they may be working on. What's critical success factor? It is a project that is designed to move the needle on the mission towards the vision. Okay? Critical success factor projects often require an outlay of both financial capital and human capital in order to be implemented. So in particular, besides the strategic context, and I actually have that listed as point B, point A is a real simple question. What is the business model? How does your business put $1 in the bank or in the cash register? And you want to be able to explain the business model. Is it a B2C or is it a B2B? I want you to answer the question, who are the customers and who are the competitors? And describe the overall business environment. Now, for this assignment, you can use a SWOT analysis, a Porter 5 force analysis, and you can also use the PESTLE analysis. SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Porter looks at how to evaluate a market to determine whether or not it's a good market to go into or not, but it's looking at strategic elements. And then PESTLE takes a look at the business environment. PESTLE is an acronym that stands for political, economic, sociological, technology, legal, and environment. So the two E's are economy and environment. All right, what is a stakeholder? I want you to explain what a stakeholder is. Don't confuse a stakeholder with a stockholder. And if you don't do the research on this, chances are you'll probably get this one wrong. So make sure that you're reviewing and looking at the available information to be able to effectively discuss who are the stakeholders within your case study company. Okay, so parts 2 and 3. Part 2, you're going to create a video, or well, we already said a video, but you're going to demonstrate your monitoring system. Now, your monitoring system is going to need to rely on some form of automation. So there's a couple of tools that are easy to automate and don't cost anything. TweetDeck for Twitter, and Google Alerts. There we go. Camera unfroze. So those are two. Now, there's a couple of software suites that really do a good job. Hootsuite, Feedly, and NetVibes. Feedly and NetVibes are RSS aggregators. Hootsuite you can use for social media. You can use for other social media if you have a paid account. I do not expect you to run out and buy paid accounts with any of this. You can talk about what functionality you might access if you had a paid account. I only get premium services when I am working in a client and that particular phase of a project or the entire project requires it, and at which point I have the client pay for it. So I get along just fine day to day without having to buy a subscription, and you should be able to too. The last part is I want you to get your system up and running. So your monitoring system is collecting data in one shape, form, or another. I want you to step back and take a look at that and ask yourself, what have I learned about my business? Now, I'm going to be very specific. I don't want to hear that you're not participating in social media. You don't need to set up an elaborate monitoring system to know that your case study company doesn't do any social media. What I do want you to know or look at is I want you to see if there are any crises on the horizon, okay? And what does it look like? And by the way, the John Taffer interview that I did, and I'll post it with this archive in the message center. John is dealing with location-based businesses primarily. You can extrapolate what we talked about to a much larger market, but for the most part, location-based businesses, LBBs. And what John says is important, and failure to follow through on some of those could be an issue for, I'll tell you what, there comes the camera. It will be an issue for those companies that aren't on top of it. And that would be information that you could gain by monitoring. You know, if you were to monitor for a keyword, say like location-based business, that would be information that you could use. So we want to look for information that allows us to mitigate the risk of a crisis. How can we avoid a crisis from looking at the data that we're collecting in our monitoring system? The next thing, we want to keep communicating with our audiences on a regular basis. And so we need to be able to have content that we can share. Now, the process of creating content in the form of the press release, that's grueling. Okay, generating. I saw a statistic the other day, and this goes back to my days when I was running political campaigns in direct mail, and our golden rule was that for somebody, and my specialty in politics was judicial candidates. In Florida, the county and circuit judges are elected, and the problem is that the judges can't really express any political opinion because they're supposed to be NOP, no official party, and if they do, they're subject to judicial review and punishment. So the question is, how do you differentiate one candidate from another? Well, there's a number of ways that it can be done, but the point that I want to make is that we want to be able to communicate to the audience these elements in a way that when they get into the voting booth, they recognize our candidate's name. Now, think for a moment. How much are you going to have to communicate with an audience in order to achieve that outcome? A lot. That's why back in the 90s and 80s, when election time would come around, you would see tons of political mail in your mailbox. And the golden rule was you had to do for a judicial candidate that at the circuit level. So as a county is a geographic area, confined area, coincides with counties in the state, whatever state you happen to be in. Circuits are a little bit different. Circuits tend to be about the size of a congressional candidate's district. And so the cost to run that type of campaign versus a county campaign is rather significant. Back in the day, we used to say that you could run a county judge campaign for about $65,000, but a circuit judge was going to be anywhere from $100,000 to $125,000. Why? Because what you were having to do was to send enough literature, enough direct mail that you were creating name brand recognition. You wanted when a voter went into the booth that the voter looked at the names that were available for judge, and chances are the only thing they're ever going to remember is the name. Oh, I've seen that name before. They must have done something good, and bam, they mark that person as their choice for judge. Now, we used to say it would take 12 pieces of mail. I would tell a candidate when I sat down with them that, the budget is, as I mentioned, if you don't have that to spend, I can send less pieces out. But the problem is that I'm not going to cover the electorate to the point, and I'm not going to be able to send as many pieces as I would like. The candidate that we ended up becoming great friends, he was the public defender for Kissimmee, and then became the city manager, and he wanted to become a county judge. And I don't know if you've ever seen any reruns of Matlock. Neil, who's passed away a couple years ago, Neil was Florida's version of Matlock. He was just a crustacean. I don't know how else to say it. And something else, Neil and my political values were drastically different than Neil's. And he knew in order to hire me, he was going to have to kind of disguise who he was. Or what he did very effectively was he accentuated those points where we saw things in common. But to make a long story short, after a couple weeks into the campaign, Neil came to me and he said, look, I'm having trouble raising funds. And the reality is the reason that I got into this was I really am not that concerned about becoming a judge. It'd be nice, but that's not my main goal. Our opponent, who was worked for the district attorney's office, he goes, he's an SOB, and there's no way he should ever become a judge. If he's going to be a judge, I want to cost him a lot of money. So Neil says to me, your job is to figure out how to make him spend the maximum amount of money that he can in order to win this election. Boy, that's a tall order, right? So what I had to do, I had to identify super voters, because super voters are who get polled and whatnot before the election. I targeted all my advertising material, all my direct mail to super voters. and my messaging was to super voters. And I took a $35,000 campaign and made it look like it was about an $80,000 campaign. Our opponent ended up spending almost $150,000, which at the time was unheard of, particularly for a non-metropolitan county such as Kissimmee. Actually, it's Osceola County, where Kissimmee is. So the reason that I'm covering that is because as you're doing your review, you want to find content from your monitoring system that you'll be able to generate content. Now, I said 12 for a political campaign back in the day. I read something recently from Guy Kawasaki. No, it wasn't Guy Kawasaki. It was Gary Vaynerchuk. And Gary said that to be an effective communicator in today's social media environment, you've got to be producing, and he was talking posts, but somewhere in the neighborhood of over 100 posts a day. So if you're trying to generate all that content in-house, you're going to have a huge, huge expense. But if you're monitoring, if you got a monitoring system set up and you're looking at interesting content that's coming in, that you can take a piece of content and repurpose it and share it with your folks, that's awesome. And look at all the time, effort, and energy that you save just by working your monitoring system. So that's the second type of learning that you can get from the monitoring system. The third is, as you're looking at all this, you come up with original and creative ideas for newsworthy content, or so that are either real events or pseudo events. So when I talk about learnings, those are the things that you want to report on. All right, so that is the assignment. Let me talk about the discussion. I give you a lot to read in the discussion. It's important because what we're dealing with, let me bring this back to the case study. Crisis management back in the 80s was really defined, the benchmark for how to do it and how to do it better than anybody else, by the pharmaceutical company Johnson & Johnson. Johnson is the maker of Tylenol, Advil, all those type of products. And back in the 80s, somebody was getting to bottles of Tylenol, getting in and injecting into, at the time, Tylenol was a capsule. And they were injecting into the capsule cyanide. Now, if you've ever read a James Bond novel, you know that all you have to do is just get a little bit of cyanide in your mouth. It instantly goes through your bloodstream and stops your heart. You're dead instantaneously. Imagine this. People were going to the supermarket, to the drugstore, buying Tylenol, taking and popping 2 Tylenol, sometimes before they even got home, and they were falling dead. Your Johnson & Johnson, your marquee product, Tylenol, and it's killing people. Okay? How do you handle that crisis? Well, go read it. Go figure this one out on your own and study it. But think about this. For the most part, with one notable exception, and that's Boeing, today, crises, PR crises for companies, are defined not by people dying, but by people's feelings being hurt. Oh my gosh. And is it real? Yes, it's real. And is it something that companies need to take into consideration? Yes. Do they do it well? Not all the time. And sometimes they pander, and sometimes they're unaware. There's a happy medium that they need to find. But where does that come from? Well, it comes from 2 areas. It comes from critical theory, and it comes from postmodernism. Now, I could spend a whole course discussing either one of those, And I'm not. Again, I'm going to toss this to you and tell you, take a look at all the material that I provide you in the discussion. But then I also want you to go and do research on postmodernism and critical theory and think about, and in your discussion post, I want you to think about how that applies back to your crisis and worldview that we as public relations counselors, which by the way is a term that back in 1924, Edward Bernays coined. He felt that what people do with PR is so important that their title should be counselor, public relations counselor. Edward Bernays, by the way, or Eddie as I like to call him, Sigmund Freud's double nephew. Think about that, it'll blow your mind. And Eddie was born in 1892. We call him the modern father of public relations and of marketing. Why? Well, Eddie lived a freakishly long life. He was 103 when he passed away in 1995, and he was very active through all those years and had just tremendous impact on marketing. As a matter of fact, so much of what you see today is derivative from what Bernays did over the years. And we'll talk more about that later on. But so really take a look at all that and dive into the postmodernism and critical theory information. Okay? I'm going to pause because I need some more juice to keep my throat from getting nasty. All I did was stop we're still recording. So we're just going to jump back in. I've got just a tiny little bit. Maybe one more swallow after that. It's live TV. What do you expect? Okay. So the last piece that I want to talk about is the function of public relations. And I need to stop because I need to, I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen. You're probably saying, yeah, there we go. I was sharing a different screen. Now I'm sharing the correct screen. So if everything goes right, you should be seeing the chalkboard. And we're going to go ahead and get a new blank board. And what I want to explain to you is public relations and a couple concepts. So let's draw let's draw an abstract picture of what a company looks like. I'm going to say a company is a circle. And in the center of the circle is where we have the leadership. Could be the CEO, could be the president, could be any of the chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, all those folks. Or it could be, so it could be the president, CEO, or even just the owner of the business. And now I'm going to intersect this company and set up some divisions. There, how's that? Pretty cool, huh? Oh, I see a errant. Now it's good. Okay. So if we look at four major divisions within the company, we have production. Something is produced. If it's virtual, it's virtual. It could be just the brand that's produced, but something is produced. once it's produced, we have to get rid of it. So, and we're going to go to a different quadrant for that, and that's going to be sales and marketing that gets rid of the what we've produced. Now, there's two other areas that we need to talk about. One is the area that defines and forecasts and projects. So we're going to call these forecasters. And then the last area is, we can call this maintenance. And you're probably saying, what the heck do you mean? Actually, I don't like maintenance. I'm going to get rid of maintenance. And I'm going to call this staff. So why? Actually, let's come back and do this again. I'm going to go back and say maintenance, because one of the areas that I want to pick on. So MAINT, that stands for maintenance. Maintenance is going to be all those departments or divisions within the company that maintain the company. So finances is one. Human resources is another. And so it's in the maintenance where we're bringing in people to work in all the other areas, right? So now that's our company. But you're probably saying to yourself, wait a minute, you said you were going to talk to us about the function of PR, and PR is not on there anywhere. That's right. Does anybody know where PR is? Oh, come on, it's down in the Caribbean. Look, I've been quarantined for I don't know how long, and the jokes, they just don't get any better than that. So I'm here all week, live with it. No, seriously, PR is actually on this. We just haven't drawn them in yet. Public relations is a boundary function, and it operates at two different levels. It operates at a level between each of the departments and their respective audiences. And one more audience up here. There we go. Now, the boundary, so let's make this real obvious. We're going to color this in. Hash mark it in. You now understand why I'm not an animator. All right, so that's the boundary between the organization and the departments and all the audiences. But then we have another boundary, and that is right in here between the president and the rest of the company. Now, public relations a lot of times aligns perfectly with marketing, but companies can place it in a lot of different areas. They can separate it. They can separate the traditional role, which we would call this the traditional role out here at the outer boundary, and they can separate that from the inner role. And in the inner role, a lot of times they may end up calling that communication or even executive communication. So you have two different groups, but they have to work in harmony, because even though at this boundary, their primary audience is here, we know that that's not the case. They actually will send a message, and it will not stop within the organization. It goes out into the greater market, and that's where there's many audiences. So a couple terms. We just got a doorbell. Hi, Ryan. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hello.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing well. What class are you in?
I'm in Internet Strategic Public Relations.
Well, excellent. I'm just finishing up. And
Oh, okay.
I've had nobody to talk to.
Oh boy. All right.
So you should be seeing on your screen right now a diagram, correct?
I do, yeah. Yes,
Okay.
audience. Yeah.
So what that represents, in public relations, we call public relations a boundary function, and it operates at two different boundaries within the organization. It operates at an outer boundary, so that boundary is between each of the different departments and respective audiences. And then there's the inner boundary, which in the very center, that's where the owner, the president, the CEO, everybody that might be occupying any of the C-suites, chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, all those. And so the public relations has a responsibility to communicate internally as well as externally. And so that's why we call it a boundary function. Um,
Okay. Let me see.
so now I'm trying to think, I have to get back on. I'm glad you came in, but I got to reorient myself where I was.
That's great.
Let's see here. Okay. So I'm not going to go back through everything, Ryan, because this will be an archive and you'll be able to play it. Okay.
Okay.
But I think I was just about done where I wanted to be in wrapping up with the
Yeah,
boundary
I
line.
can definitely watch the archive too.
Now, the other thing that because I've actually been running. It says 2 hours, but I don't think it's been 2 hours. uh, Actually, it's been about an hour and a half. At any rate, I better make sure I didn't fall asleep in the middle or something. It didn't seem like 2 hours. Um,
That is a
the When you're talking to yourself, it kind of gets kind of batty, you know.
mm-hmm.
Anyway, what I will also do is I've got additional content that Thursday I'll run another session for some additional content on Thursday
Okay. Okay.
from 2 to 3. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool beans. So remind me what your case study company is.
It's Advanced Photo and Imaging. They're a photo lab print shop in Ashland, Oregon.
That's right. That's right. Okay. So let me come back to a little bit for you, just to you made the effort to come in. And I don't want to disappoint you. Um, so this week, with regard to the assignment, you need to create a presentation. And I'm glad we're talking about this because I didn't mention this in particular, this particular point, that the assignment is a 6-minute video, 3 minutes on part A, 3 minutes on part B. And the reason that it's time constrained is public relations work has a lot of constraint to it. So being able to get a message out concisely is very important in public relations. Now I'm going to
All
warn you,
right.
as you
Yeah.
listen to the archive, you're going to say, yeah, you're not concise.
I have to get good with the length
Yes, you
and
do.
wording of yeah.
So you'll want to practice what you've written. Now,
Okay.
what you also want to do is you want to lay out in the first part the strategic context and basically describe your organization's business. So you do all the strategy pieces, you do all the analysis pieces with regard to customer, competitors, and environment, and then look at and define what stakeholders are.
Okay.
Stakeholders are not stockholders, although a
Right.
stockholder can be a stakeholder.
Okay.
Okay.
Stakeholders are customers and uh, suppliers and
Yeah,
various things.
it's actually anybody that is an audience member, and
Mm-hmm.
these categories, Ryan, um, the, the way we break the model for the business down is this category, this corner right here is where we produce the product. Then we have to get rid of it. We have to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
We have another quadrant where they work on developing the models and forecasts for the business. And by the way, these aren't necessarily equal size, even though I drew them as equal size. And
Sure.
then down the bottom here is what we call the maintenance function. And maintenance is what keeps the business running. So it's human resources, it is IT, it's finance. All those categories would be down at the bottom. So if you look at that, that means that there are audience members for the people in IT, for the people in finance, for the people in human resources. Just like out here, you identified this correctly in terms of the production. This is the suppliers, the supply chain.
Mm-hmm.
Over here, this audience is the general market and specifically the target market. And then the same for down here with everybody that works in forecasting and modeling within the company. They have supply chains as well that would be affected, that would be part of the audience. Now, when the company does something to an audience or does something and an audience member is affected, then we say they're a stakeholder because we did something and it impacted them. So we need to be aware of that.
So
Then,
even community members that are affected somehow by the operations or
exactly. On the other hand, if somebody in the audience can do something that can affect the company, then that would also indicate that they're stakeholders. So,
right. Okay.
let's say a community. I'll give you a great example. Where are you located, by the way?
I'm in Reno, Nevada.
Have you ever
Myself.
been? Have you ever been to the campus?
UNR?
No,
Or you mean
Full Sail.
wholesale? No, I have not. I haven't been to Florida since the year 2000.
Oh wow.
But I love it there. Yeah.
Well,
I've been to Disney World when I was a kid a couple times.
cool.
Yeah.
Well, Full Sail, part of the executive ownership of Full Sail. So it's such a complicated organizational structure. They don't want anybody to really understand it, which is okay. It's a private, we're a private enterprise, so
Mhm.
that works just fine. But part of that organization is a real estate division. And
Oh,
a couple years ago, and Full Sail's campus is a combination of a couple office buildings that were bought initially. And then as the campus grew, it bought a huge strip center mall. And over the last 20 some years, we've, it doesn't look like a strip center at all. It's an amazing looking campus. Well,
awesome. Yeah.
down the street, from Full Sail, was another shopping center. And this one was kind of cool because at the one end was a supermarket, at the other end was a movie theater. And I believe the plans were originally to allow student production to be shown in the movie theater, and then also use the movie theater for some classrooms as well.
Oh,
Well, just a little bit further down the road is a residential neighborhood. It's not a high-end neighborhood; it's very middle class. But the community protested. They did not want to see students um, coming to that shopping center in the quantity that they thought.
uh-huh.
And as a result, they made a major stink. I'm not sure whether Full Sail has sold and this goes back probably at least 10 years.
Yeah.
Finally, Full Sail, again, I don't know whether they sold the property or not, but just last month, the movie theater was demolished. It no longer exists. So
Oh,
there's an example where an audience reacted to something that the company was wanting to do, and it created there was a reaction, and so as a result, we would have to say that the people that live in that neighborhood, they are stakeholders of the company, whether we like it or not.
for sure. Yeah. And it
So
takes some
that's
communication to deal with.
that's just a little bit
Right.
of how all this works. And like I said, I
Okay.
cover a lot more in the whole video. One other thing I do want to show you and go over is the rubric.
Okay.
So part one, which is worth 20 points, is really part one of the video. Okay, so
Okay.
that's the first half, and it's all about how you describe and can explain the strategic context of your company, the vision, all the critical success factors, all that information. It's all in the video, and that's worth 20 points. Then a lot of the rest of this is all related to your monitoring system and your presentation. So organization and folder structure is, have you set up something that is automated and organized, because you don't want to go in and do Google searches every morning. You want information to be coming to you. And that's 15 points. 10 points is, do you have customized feeds? So an easy way to handle that, hint, is Google Alerts. Set up a Google Alert and bring it in.
Yeah. I have been getting emails from that since I heard about it through this program earlier.
Very good.
Yeah, that seems handy.
The next portion is monitoring results from your monitoring system. And I don't want to hear my company doesn't have a social media site or isn't doing any Facebook posts or anything like that. You don't learn that from monitoring. Monitoring, we're looking at three things that we want to, areas that we want to look at. Information that we can use to prevent a crisis. Information or stories or posts or whatever that we can repurpose and send back out without us having to create new content altogether. And then the third thing is looking at all that and saying, gee, are there any good ideas here for a newsworthy event that we can create, whether it's a real event or a pseudo event is immaterial, but finding something that we can twist and turn and make our own and then run with it.
Sure.
The presentation needs to be professional. That's the visual. So that's 5 points. The audio has got to be clear audio. That's 5 points. It's got to be within that time frame. I will give you, and I don't put it in here, but for anybody that's listening, you get a bonus. You'll know that I actually give you a 30-second buffer. So if you run 6 minutes and 20 seconds, 6 minutes and 29 seconds, even 6 minutes and 30 seconds, I don't deduct any points. If you run 6 minutes and 31 seconds, you lose all 5 points.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then grammar, spelling, and overall mechanics is important. And make sure that you're putting references at the back for where you're getting your information or how you're getting your information that you're using. Okay.
All right.
All right. I know that was short, but believe me, the video is not going to be short.
Okay. No problem. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time to
and Ryan,
explain
come
that.
in. I mean, if you're working and you have a question, I run this room open like this from 9 to 12, and usually in the afternoon from 2 to 4. again, with having set classes, some of those times get eaten up, but that's my plan. Just so you know, the 11 to
Okay.
12 slot I usually reserve for new media marketing, and then 2 to 3, and look, we're at 4:30.
Yeah.
2 to 3 for public relations. Okay,
Okay.
but
Sounds good.
try and
Yeah.
come back Thursday because you're really gonna like Thursday.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Dr. John. Yeah, I will.
All right, Ryan. You take care, and I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye
Goodbye.
now.